Please welcome our keynote speaker, CEO and founder of BoldHaus, Angelique Rewers.
In 2009, I enrolled in a program for 100 entrepreneurs. And at the end of that program year, they announced that we would have the opportunity to apply to be one of 5 entrepreneurs that would get a chance to compete for a prize that was worth $25,000. Now, I had had a really good year in my business that year, so I knew that if I applied, I stood a decent chance of being selected as one of those 5 competitors. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could win the $25,000 prize. But there was just one problem. The 5 competitors would have to get up on a stage like this one and give a presentation to an audience of 800 to 1,000 other small business owners. And the thing was, I had been hiding for the last 20 years. I had been doing everything I could not to draw any attention to myself. Because 20 years earlier, in 1989, we didn't talk so much about mental health. And we definitely didn't talk about the effects of bullying in schools on kids' mental health. And this is where I have to say that if bullying brings up big emotions for you, please take care of yourself. In 1989, I drew the ire of our school's bully. And she was not just any bully. She was not only effective at what she did, but she was committed to her role. She knew how to galvanize people. So she created a club called Kids Against Angelique Rewers. And if you missed that in the intro, that's me. And she called it CAR for short. She understood the power of branding, so she created a car logo. And it was 1989, I'm dating myself, but jean jackets were all the rage in 1989, and people would put flair on them, pins and buttons. So she got herself a button maker, and she gave out car pins to all the members of the club. She understood the power of consistent messaging. So she started something called a slam book. It was a notebook that was passed around each week at school in which the kids who were part of Kids Against Angelique Rewers would write down all the things they hated most about me that week, whether or not they were true. And she understood the importance of staying organized. So they had weekly club meetings, and they would decide who was responsible for bullying me in each one of my classes, as well as when the bell rang, who would walk behind me to the next class in order to tease me, trip me, spit on me, and on at least 3 occasions, pull me by my hair through the hallway. In 1989, I would have given anything for mental health first aid to have been available to the teachers, the administrators, the guidance counselors, the folks who worked in the front office. It was not available then, but it is available today to every organization who wants it because of all of you. And so when I say to you that it is an honor, a true honor for me to be here today, I do not just say that as the woman that I am today. I say that to you as the young girl that I was in 1989. Congratulations on your 25 amazing years. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now, I started to share this story with you because of the dilemma that I faced in 2009. And I promise before we wrap up today, I will share with you the wild things that ended up transpiring in 2009. But first, I want to talk to you about what we're here to talk about today, which is designing success forward and what it means to gain buy-in in today's world so that you all can advance this incredible mission forward. And I realize that we're having this conversation about designing success forward at a time that you all are facing incredible headwinds. We have major funding challenges today for all of us who are change agents in the marketplace, and competing priorities for that shrinking pool of dollars that's available, and competing solutions to accomplish those competing priorities. There's now a greater demand for measurable outcomes than there has ever been, and in many fields, including yours, often the best result of the work that you are doing are the things that don't happen. How do you prove the negative? How do you prove that it worked and those things didn't happen? There's disruptive technology. AI is one of them. Changing social trends, and just a sense of fear that's in the air today. And whenever decision makers are feeling a sense of fear, they say no to more things because the no is always easier than the yes. And of course, all of these headwinds are coming at a time that we have never had such a need for mental health support. Not only do we have what social media has done to our youth. I'm the mom of twin boys who are about to be 16 at the end of July, so yes, stay off the roads, right? But we know that, but there's more coming. Like, we've not seen anything yet. I was just reading a research report by an organization called Gartner. If you're not in the IT space, you may have never heard of them, but they're in the B2B IT consulting kind of a space. And I was reading a report. It had something to do with sales. And way down, buried in this report, Gartner has predicted that by 2028, because of AI, there will be 1 billion people on this planet who have a digital addiction and thus a mental health need. 1 billion. And 2028, that's what, 2.5 years from now. So we know that the work that you're doing matters more than ever, and we know these headwinds are strong. But here's what else we also know. A plane does not get off the ground without the resistance of wind. That we only take flight when we push against that wind. That's the other side of the coin. All right, I want you guys to help me with a quick exercise here. If you are so able, and I know we're not all, I actually have multiple sclerosis, and there are sometimes I cannot stand. But if you are so able, please stand up where you are and help me out with something really quick. Everybody stand up. I know it's late in the day, but stand up. All right, if you are not able to stand, you can do this from wherever you're seated. On the count of 3, what I would like you all to do is I would like you to reach up. You don't have to jump, just reach up as high as you possibly can on the count of 3. All right, we're gonna go as high as we can on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Reach, high as you can, Okay, good, all right, put your hands down. All right, stay standing for a second. All right, we're gonna do it one more time. And here's my ask. Can you get 2 inches higher this second time? Can I get 2 more inches from wherever you were that time on the count of 3? Okay? 1, 2, 3. Reach, reach, reach. 2 inches higher, 2 inches higher. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. All right, awesome. Give yourselves a round of applause. Now, raise your hands. Raise your hand if you reached 2 inches higher the second time. Let me see the hands. So that's about like 80% of the room or so, maybe 90%. So here's my question to you. How is it that if I asked you on the first try to reach as high as you possibly can, how is it that we were able to get 2 extra inches the second time? How is that possible? Here's the thing. Olympic athletes, when they get to the Olympics, they swim faster than they have ever swam. They jump higher than they have ever jumped before. Why? Because there is always more untapped potential. There's always more untapped potential. We live in an infinite universe. And sometimes that extra untapped potential is the potential that's inside us. It's the digging deeper, it's the grit that we have to go deeper to get. And sometimes, the untapped potential is in sharper strategies and adding tools to our toolbox. And sometimes the wind that we're facing is so strong, it's going to have to be both. It's going to have to be the deeper grit, and it's going to have to be sharper strategies. And we have to put them together. And that would be now. That would be right now that we have to put them together. So what I'm going to do is share some strategies that you can have to put into your toolbox to help you do what you do so you can reach more organizations, more communities, more people inside those organizations. And I'm going to share with you a framework that you can use to do that. And I was so thrilled as I dug into what you all do, and I saw in your materials this idea of identify, understand, and respond. I was smiled because it mirrors so much of what I'm about to share with you. So I know that you're going to resonate with this, because there's somewhat of a relationship back to identify, understand, and respond. So I'm going to share with you a AAA framework, something I've used for over 25 years. Whenever I've been in a situation where I needed to drive positive change forward. And sometimes that change has been with decision makers, and sometimes that change has been with entire groups of employees, and sometimes it's been change that we were looking to drive out in the community. The thing is, this framework is rooted in how humans think and behave. So, at least for the next 20 years, until we're dealing with the humanoid robots, we can use this framework anytime that we are looking to drive that change forward. But today, I'm going to speak about this in terms of decision makers, because you all are working either inside of associations or universities or K-12 organizations or nonprofits or for-profits, or you're working with them. And there are decision makers and there are stakeholders who control the decisions and the money and the resources and the allocation of people's times that you all need. You need them to make certain decisions, and you need them to allocate those resources. So I'm going to share this framework in the lens of you driving those decisions forward ethically. The first step of this framework is awareness. We have to make sure decision makers are aware of the right things so that they can make the decisions that are going to support people getting access to the mental health first aid training that they need. Once we create awareness, then and only then can we truly shape attitude. attitude in terms of how decision makers feel about something. Do they feel it's a priority? Do they feel it's a good thing for their organization to spend money and time on? And lastly, once we have shaped those attitudes, we can inspire and invite action. So I'm going to give you a strategy that you can use for each one of these steps, starting with awareness. When it comes to awareness, we have to ask ourselves, who needs to be aware? Who needs to be aware, and what do they need to be aware of in order to take action? And again, that action might be approving your program or deciding that we want to expand beyond 70 instructors, or that we need more funding, or that we need to better communicate to the people in our organization that we've made this investment in mental health first aid, and we need to share it out with our students, with our professors, with our employees, with our leaders, with our community. Here's the thing. Somebody once said, right? Teamwork makes the dream work. They clearly didn't understand that when it came to decisions. Unfortunately, we are in the era of decision-making teams. Every time you're asking for funding, or you are looking to get more people trained or pull people away from their office for maybe 7 hours or whatever it is, it's rarely just one person who's making that decision. So we now have to cast a much bigger net in terms of who has awareness of your programs. Those senior decision makers that you used to talk to really aren't enough anymore. We have to make sure that financial decision makers, the bean counters, are aware, because they're influencing decisions more than they ever have. The people and the culture leaders, the employee wellness coordinators, HR professionals, maybe even inside your organization, the learning and the organizational development folks, the L&D folks. They may need to know about what you're doing. The internal stakeholders, those people who were leading entire schools within universities or business units or divisions. We also need to make sure that the critical resource hungry hippos know about you. Do you remember that game when we were kids? You'd hit it and all those marbles would get gobbled up? Right now, inside of every single one of your organizations, whether it's an association or a college or a company, there are groups of people, departments, that are gobbling up all of the money. For a lot of organizations, it's the IT groups, thanks to AI. But we want to make sure they understand the value of what you all do. Why? Because there are meetings where budgets are being discussed, where what people in the organization are going to focus on and spend their time on is being discussed. And the people who are eating up all those marbles, their opinion carries a lot of weight. And when it comes to mental health first aid, you want that CIO or whoever that really weighted decision maker is to say, whoa, that is not what I want to see cut. That's the one thing that I want to make sure we always have the budget and the time and the resources to do. Depending on your organization, maybe purchasing or procurement, depending. And also, if you don't spend any time with internal communications, make sure you know who those folks are, because they control the airwaves inside of organizations. And the more mental health first aid is talked about inside of organizations, the better it often is. So that's often the who. This is the net we want to cast inside organizations today. Then we have to think about, well, what do these folks need to know? It's interesting, decision makers and the way they think. One thing we can use to our advantage is this concept of cognitive closure. We all love closure, right? Doesn't it feel good to get closure? Decision makers love having closure as well, but it's a little bit different for them. Decision makers don't need all the information. We often think, let's tell them all the data. Let's give them everything we could possibly tell them because we love this. This is our work. This is what we do. But decision makers need just enough clarity to feel confident. Even consensus is rooted in confidence. Just enough to feel confident taking action. So we need to be clear, concise, and consistent on that just enough information that decision makers need to feel confident taking action. And it turns out it's actually pretty simple what they most need to know. The first thing they need to know is specific, visible signs that there is a gap to close. If you've trained 70 instructors in the last year, well then what gap are we trying to close? You want to train another 70? What's the visible sign that we have that shows us we would need to do that? Show me the visible evidence of that gap. Next, they want to know the available solutions to close the gap. Boiled down. What are our options? And you always want to give them 3. You want to give them 3. And you want to say, these are our pros and cons. Pros and cons on this one, pros and cons on this one, pros and cons on this one, and this is what I recommend. But they like to know the available solution set. Then they want to know who can help us with this. And that's great because your answer is you or the team around you or the external trainers first aiders that can come in. Next, they want to know how much needs to be invested in this to close the gap and why. Now, here's the one everyone's afraid of, but don't be afraid of this. Decision makers want to know where this, the solution, could go wrong. And the thing is, things can go wrong. But you know how not to let that happen, meaning making sure that the people who are coming to a training actually have the ability to attend without their boss or manager trying to pull them out or texting them all day. So that they understand the expectations of what they're going to have to do, right? Those are the kinds of things you can say, look, to set this up for success, here's the 3 things we know we have to do, and this is going to work because we take these steps. And lastly, the most important question of all, why this really must be done right now. All right, next let's look at attitude. And this is my favorite one to talk about, is shaping attitude. Once we've laid the groundwork on what decision makers and stakeholders really need to be aware of, we can really shape how they're feeling. And to do that, we can use something called the narrative transportation theory. Sounds really complicated, but if you've ever been transported in a movie that you were watching or a book that you were reading, this speaks to really what happens to us when we effectively use stories. People get pulled in and transported somewhere else. And when we're in that state, we are more likely to shift our attitude about how we feel about something. Storytelling really is magic. It lights up our brains in ways that logic and information and data doesn't. It allows us to put the emotion before the logic, which is exactly how decisions are made. It lowers our resistance to learning something new, and most importantly, in today's world, it enhances our memory retention of what we've learned. And trust me, if you have the attention of a decision maker, you want to make sure that they remember the conversation they just had with you. And the thing is, there are storytelling opportunities every single day, all day, in the work that you all are doing, in the presentations that you are giving, in the meetings that you are holding, in communications internally or externally that you're putting together, in the content that you're creating, the proposals that you're writing, whether it's an internal proposal for a new program or a grant proposal, the trainings that you're leading, and most importantly, the biggest missed opportunity when it comes to storytelling is after a program has been done. Because it's not enough to sell decision makers on their initial decision, but we also have to keep them sold on the decisions they've made so they feel good about the investments. A good story has just a couple of key pieces. Oh, excuse me, I put that next. The must-have stories that you want to have to share with leaders inside your organization are really important. The first one that you want to have, and most people have this one, this is the one that everyone typically has at the ready, and that's the human impact story. And I bet if I asked each one of you as you left here today to tell me the story of somebody who was impacted positively by mental health first aid, you would all immediately be able to share that story. And that's great, but it's not the most important story you need to be able to tell. There are two others. One is the program story. A story about the way a particular training or program came together. A group of people who came together, when they came together, why that was the timing of when they came together, who was in that room, how did the program come together? And the next story you need to have, and this is the most important one, is a decision-making story, where the decision itself, the decision to set time aside to do mental health first aid training, the decision to invest the dollars to do the training, the decision to expand it to more instructors or more first aiders, how that decision came to be. And that, in today's market, is the most valuable story that you could ever tell to another decision maker. Stories are actually pretty easy to tell. They have just three parts. They have the mess, they have the turning point, and the success. That's it. Mess, turning point, success. So if it was a decision-making story, it might sound something like this. Well, Tamika, I understand how hard it can be sometimes to find that funding. Let me share with you what Michelle did. About a year ago, we were expecting to move forward with another training. We had everything lined up. We knew exactly who we were going to train. We knew when we were going to do it and where we were going to do it. And at the last minute, we got pushback on everything. And here's how Michelle solved that problem. And as a result, we were able to do this. That's putting the decision in the story. That is the story. Now, if you want to add a little Hollywood magic to your stories, you can do that in a couple of key ways. Every good story needs a hero's journey, a person who's going to be the hero of the story. There's actually a really great documentary about this from a guy I know named Pat Solomon. And the documentary is called Finding Joe. And it's about the hero's journey. So if you ever get a chance to watch it, I highly recommend it. But you want to make sure somebody is the star of the stories you tell. When you can, you want to bring in one of the senses. Something that the audience can feel or see or smell, really get that picture in their mind's eye. Here's another secret from Hollywood and good authors. An audience never knows what details you didn't give them. Typically, a good story is ruined by too many details. And last but not least, and this really is a sales technique that I'm giving you here, but at the end of a good story, don't tell the decision maker what the meaning of the story was. Don't say, "So Bob, here's what this means to us." Instead, you want to say nothing. Bob, or whoever the decision maker is, needs to come to that understanding in their own mind, because that's really when they connect to the true lesson that you are sharing with them. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, really super quickly, because we only have a little bit of time, 60 seconds for each person. I would love for you to turn to the person next to you and share quickly one decision-making story that you can think of, and then after 60 seconds, give your pair share partner a turn. But I want you to think of that decision-making story that you can take back to your organizations. So you have 2 minutes. Go, go, go. Okay, go ahead and switch partners to the other person. Okay, about 20 more seconds. All right, we're going to come back together. Hopefully, you've all been able to think of at least one decision-making story that you can start incorporating into all the conversations that you're having with the powers that be inside your organizations. And you know, one of the other great benefits about using stories like this is oftentimes we're not the only person talking to the ultimate decision maker. Sometimes there's another layer that's in between us and ultimately the people making the decisions. And stories is one of those things that can easily be passed from one individual to the next. All right. Last but not least, we're going to talk about action, inspiring and inviting the actions that we really need our decision makers and our key stakeholders to take. And for this, we can use a technique that's called the fresh start effect. And what's really great about the fresh start effect is we all kind of sort of know this, but maybe you haven't put your finger on it. Humans are more likely to initiate change at the start of a new time marker, like a new calendar year, a new quarter, a new fiscal year, a new school year. We all do it, even though most people now won't admit to doing a New Year's resolution. Folks have just changed it now to their word of the year, right? But we're all still kind of doing it. There's something to be said for the start of a new whatever. And we all tell ourselves that it's going to be different this school year or this calendar year. That's all part of the fresh start effect. And we can use that to our advantage if we want to inspire and invite action from decision makers in a way that's not so frustrating, in a way that really gets what we're looking for with the wind instead of against it. So here's a great acronym that you can remember. Decision makers act when? They act when alarm bells are sounding like crazy. Not when we tell them they could go off. Humans aren't really good at often taking the preventative action that they should. They're more inclined to take that action when the alarm bells are sounding. Now, those could be alarm bells inside your organization, or they could be alarm bells that have sounded for another organization that your decision makers can relate to. See what happened to that association? We don't want that to happen to us. Do you see what's happening in that city? We can now make sure that doesn't happen to us. Alarm bells are very, very effective for inspiring that action. The next is the calendar. It's incumbent upon us to really map out the calendar. What's happening? Is there an offsite? Is there a top leaders meeting? When does the new school year start? When is spring break? When are certain budget proposals or grant proposals due? When do we have a new initiative kicking off? We have to know what's on those calendars because that's our friend. And last but not least are the task items. The task items that are on these leaders' to-do lists. They're priority initiatives. The changes they're already trying to make and they're actively taking action on them. When we can align what decisions we're asking them to make to those task items they've already got, we're halfway there. When the alarm bells are ringing, something's coming up on the calendar, or there are task items on that decision maker's plate, the language that we can use is this is our moment. You're talking to that leader, or you're talking to your boss who's going to be talking to that leader. Listen, Nicole, right now, with this coming up, this is our moment. The fact that this just happened for this organization over there and we don't want it to happen to us, when it comes to securing that funding internally, this is our moment. This is our moment. Awareness, attitude, action. This is how humans, including decision makers and leaders of organization, move ethically towards the decisions and the changes that we want them to make. Said a slightly different way, action happens when the path is crystal clear, the moment is right, and the cost of staying still becomes unacceptable. Now, Now, I promised before we wrapped up, I would share with you what ended up happening in 2009. And the really uninteresting part of this story, is that I did decide to apply to be one of those 5 competitors to compete for the $25,000 prize. And I got up on stage and I gave my presentation. I won the whole darn thing. Thank you. But that's really not the interesting part. I won. It was great. And I felt really good, right? And the whole reason, though, that I was afraid to do this was because I was afraid to be seen. Because in my mind, being seen meant being bullied. After they announced that I was the winner, they presented me with an award that looked almost identical to the ones that were being handed out earlier today. And then I stepped off stage to the back of the green room, and the photographer from the event came up and said, "Angelique, they want me to get some photos of you with your award out in the lobby." So we went and we did that. And after a few minutes, I started walking back to the ballroom, and the double doors opened up, and all 800 attendees were headed out to get their coffee for their coffee break. And before I even knew it, I was surrounded by all of my friends who had been in the program with me that year, and they were giving me hugs and high fives and saying congratulations. And even people I didn't know were saying congratulations. But that kind of, after a few minutes, those folks all kind of dissipated, and everybody was heading back to their hotel rooms. And all of a sudden, I see this group of 4 women walking towards me. And I can tell they're on a mission, and they're definitely coming to talk to me. First woman walks up to me and she says, "Angelique, I just want you to know, nobody in my row voted for you. We don't like you because you're a fill in the blank." She walked away. The next woman behind her said to me, "You know what your problem is? If you're going to be up on stage, you're going to have to fix all of this and all of this," putting her hands in my face, "because you looked horrible." The next woman behind her said, "No, that's not your problem. Your problem is you are just too corporate." Finally, the woman behind her walked up to me, and she noticed I had my computer bag, and she said, "Is your wallet in your bag?" I didn't know what to say because I'm in shock at this point. She reaches over, she takes one of the straps off my computer bag. She reaches her hand into my computer bag, pulls out my wallet. She opens up my wallet, takes out a $20 bill, and says, "Oh, good." She puts my wallet back in my computer bag. She puts my $20 in her bag. She pulls out a book and slams it into my chest. And she says, "You need my book." She walks off. I looked down at my book, at the book she gave me. I say my book because I did just pay $20 for it. You want to know what the book was called? How to Be Likeable. How to Be Likeable. I guess steal $20 from people. At this, I could just feel my eyes burning. I knew the tears were coming. So I started to run back to my hotel room, but this was Las Vegas, and my hotel room was like 2 miles away. Finally got back to my hotel room, and I did what any self-respecting woman does. I called my mother. My mom's always been my biggest supporter, and she said all the right things, but I was still hurting. So I climbed into bed. I cried myself to sleep. I woke up a few hours later. I sat on the end of the bed, and I started praying. And eventually, I heard this sort of thought in my head over and over again. And it kept saying to me, you are corporate. You are corporate. You are corporate. And after a little bit of time, I opened up my eyes and I knew exactly what I was going to do with my business. I knew exactly what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So I rubbed the wrinkles out of my face. I cleaned up the mascara. I grabbed my computer bag and I got up the nerve to go back down to the conference. And when I got down there, they were already in session, the ballroom was dark, and the host of the conference was up on the stage, and on the slides was this cartoon character of an ogre. So it was this big green ogre. And the host of the event is saying to the audience, "Don't feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls." And I'm just shaking my head as though she's talking straight to me. And I look forward maybe about 10, 15 feet. And sitting at the very back table is the woman who sold me her book. And at that, I looked down, I realized I still had her book with me. And so I took it out of my bag and I started to walk forward. And I just very gently placed the book down next to her. And she turned and she looked at me, and I just smiled back at her. And with that, I went and I took my seat in the front of the ballroom, and I never fed the trolls again. Thank you so much. Good luck to you. Thank you.